I walked into my own kitchen to find a stranger wearing my wedding ring, sitting in my chair and feeding my grandson breakfast like she owned the place. "Oh, you're awake, Margaret. Don't worry about breakfast. I've got everything handled now. Your son says you need to rest more." My hands started shaking, so badly I had to grip the doorframe. I stood there, speechless, watching this woman, this intruder, living my life while I became invisible in my own home. Thank you for being here with me today. If this story resonates with you, please hit that subscribe and like button, and let me know in the comments what country you're watching from. I need to know my voice is reaching people who understand. And please stay until the very end, because what happened next will shock you. My name is Margaret Elena Thornfield. I'm 68 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I knew who I could trust. I've lived in this house for 42 years. The house my late husband David and I built with our own hands. The house where I raised my son Michael, where I hosted every holiday, where I kept every family tradition alive. But that morning, staring at this stranger wearing my jewelry, I realized my son hadn't hired a caretaker to help me. He'd hired my replacement. And the worst part? I was about to discover this was only the beginning of their plan to erase me completely. The woman at my table smiled at me with fake sweetness. "I'm Elena Martinez. Michael hired me to help you with daily activities. He's so worried about you living alone." I looked at her more closely. She was wearing my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one David had given me on our 25th anniversary, the one that had supposedly gone missing last month. "That's my necklace," I whispered. Elena touched the pearls and laughed softly. "Oh no, dear. Michael gave this to me as a welcome gift. You must be confused again." Confused again? When had I been confused before? I watched her move around my kitchen with practiced ease, knowing exactly where everything belonged. She opened my refrigerator and pulled out ingredients I didn't remember buying. She used my coffee maker like she'd been using it for months. "How long have you been here?" I asked. 3 weeks now," she said gently. "Don't you remember? We talked about this yesterday, and the day before. The doctor says short-term memory issues are normal at your age." "What doctor?" I hadn't seen any doctor recently. My grandson Tommy, who was 7, looked up from his cereal. "Grandma, are you okay? You look scared." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart." But I wasn't fine. Nothing about this situation was fine. This woman was living in my house, wearing my jewelry, and apparently everyone thought this was normal. Everyone except me. Elena walked over and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Margaret, why don't you go back to bed? You had such a restless night. I'll take care of the boys." I hadn't had a restless night. I'd slept better than usual, but when I opened my mouth to say so, Elena was already guiding me toward the hallway. "The confusion will pass," she whispered. "It always does." As she led me to my bedroom, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. I looked older than I remembered. Frailer. When had that happened? Elena helped me sit on my bed, like I was an invalid. "Your medication is on the nightstand. Michael said to make sure you take it with breakfast." "What medication?" I looked at the nightstand and saw 3 pill bottles I'd never seen before. The labels had my name on them, but I didn't recognize the doctor's name or the pharmacy. "I don't take medication," I said. Elena's smile never wavered. "Of course you do, dear. Dr. Harrison prescribed them last month for your memory issues and anxiety." I stared at the bottles. Dunpezil, Memantine, Lorazepam. The first 2 were Alzheimer's medications. The third was for severe anxiety. "I don't have Alzheimer's," I said firmly. No, Elena soothed. "Just mild cognitive decline. Very manageable with the right care." She opened the first bottle and shook out a small white pill. "Take this one first." I looked at the pill in her palm. Everything in me screamed not to take it. "I'd like to speak with my son first." "Of course. He'll be by later today. But you really should take your medication now." Dr. Harrison was very specific about the timing. I pretended to consider it, then shook my head. "I think I'll wait." Elena's expression flickered for just a moment. Something cold passed across her face before the gentle smile returned. "As you wish. But if you start feeling agitated or confused, please let me know immediately." After she left, I sat on my bed trying to make sense of what was happening. 3 weeks, she'd been here 3 weeks, and I had no memory of it. No memory of hiring her, meeting her, or agreeing to any of this. I walked to my dresser and opened my jewelry box. It was nearly empty. My mother's diamond earrings were gone. My wedding ring set from David was missing. Even the simple gold chain I wore every day had vanished. I opened my closet. Half my clothes were gone. The expensive dresses David had bought me for special occasions. My good winter coat, the designer shoes I'd splurged on for our anniversary dinner. What I found hidden in my own basement 3 hours later would prove that everything I'd sacrificed for my family meant nothing to them. They weren't just stealing my house, they were stealing my identity. For 40 years, I gave everything to my family. When David died of cancer 5 years ago, I used our entire savings, $340,000, to pay for experimental treatments. I sold my mother's antique jewelry, my car, even my wedding dress, to keep him alive one more month. After the funeral, Michael moved back in temporarily with his wife Sarah and their twin boys. Temporarily became 6 months, then a year, then 2 years. I cooked, cleaned, babysat, and paid all the bills while they got back on their feet. "Mom, you're amazing," Michael would say, hugging me after I'd spent my Social Security check on groceries. "We don't know what we'd do without you." Sarah was different. She'd watch me with cold eyes, especially when I'd discipline the boys or suggest bedtime routines. "They're not your children, Margaret." She'd whisper when Michael wasn't around. "Remember your place." I ignored the warning signs. When my jewelry started disappearing, Sarah claimed she'd borrowed pieces for job interviews. When my credit card showed mysterious charges, Michael explained they were emergency expenses. He'd pay back. When they changed the locks and gave me only one key, they said it was for security. I was so desperate to keep my family together. I signed whatever papers they put in front of me. Power of attorney, healthcare directives. "Just in case something happens to you, Mom," Michael said softly. "We want to protect you." But protection felt more like imprisonment with each passing month. I wasn't allowed to answer the phone anymore because Michael said telemarketers were taking advantage of me. I couldn't drive because Sarah claimed my reflexes were too slow. I couldn't even check my own mail because they said I was throwing away important documents. I began to feel like a ghost in my own home. Invisible, irrelevant. A burden they tolerated, out of obligation. The morning I found Elena Martinez in my kitchen, I finally understood. They hadn't been protecting me. They'd been preparing to eliminate me. But what haunted me most was how easily I'd started to believe their lies. When Sarah told me I was becoming forgetful, I began to doubt my own memory. When Michael suggested I was declining, I started moving more carefully, speaking more quietly, taking up less space. They had been erasing me slowly, methodically, for months. Elena was just the final phase of their plan. That's when I remembered the lawyer's letter I'd thrown away 3 weeks earlier, the one about my father's estate that I'd assumed was spam. But what if it wasn't? What if there was money they didn't know about? While Elena distracted the boys with cartoons, I slipped down to the basement where I'd stored David's old files. My hands trembled as I searched through boxes I hadn't touched since the funeral. Hidden behind Christmas decorations, I found it, a manila envelope with my father's lawyer's letterhead. Inside was a letter dated 6 months ago. Estate settlement final notice, Margaret Elena Thornfield, primary beneficiary. My father, who'd been estranged from our family for 20 years, had died and left me his entire estate. 3 properties in California, stock portfolios, a total value of $1.2 million. The letter explained that my father had tried to contact me multiple times, but his calls and letters had been returned as undeliverable. Someone had been intercepting my mail. Someone had been screening my phone calls. I sank onto the basement floor, clutching the papers, while I'd been struggling to pay bills with my meager Social Security. While I'd been rationing my heart medication to afford groceries, there was over $1 million waiting for me. But there was more. A second letter, dated just 2 weeks ago. Final notice, legal proceedings will begin if estate is not claimed within 30 days. 24 days had already passed. In 6 days, my inheritance would go to secondary beneficiaries. my cousins who'd never even met my father. I heard footsteps above. Elena was moving around my kitchen, probably going through my cabinets, learning where everything belonged so she could take my place permanently. My hands shook as I read the lawyer's contact information. Patricia Wells, estate attorney. Her phone number was printed clearly at the bottom of each letter, but how could I call her without Elena overhearing? I looked around the basement, searching for answers, when I spotted something that made my blood run cold. Tucked behind the water heater was a composition notebook with Michael's handwriting on the cover. Timeline and assets. I opened it with trembling fingers. Page after page of calculations, property valuations, notes about Mom's assets, and transition schedule. But it was the final page that made me stop breathing. Phase 1. Caretaker, established war. Phase 2. Medical documentation in progress. Phase 3. Power of attorney transfer, complete war. Phase 4. Nursing home placement, target date March 15th. March 15th was 12 days away. Under that, in Michael's careful handwriting, expected timeline after placement, 6-8 months, natural causes. Elena confirms this is standard. They weren't just planning to steal my inheritance, they were planning to kill me. I closed the notebook with shaking hands and sat in the darkness of my basement, finally understanding the full scope of their betrayal. Michael hadn't just hired a caretaker, he'd hired someone to help him commit murder. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They thought I was a helpless old woman who'd roll over and disappear quietly. They had no idea I'd been married to a lawyer for 35 years, and I'd learned a few things about the law myself. I sat in that basement for 2 hours, reading every document in Michael's notebook. They'd planned everything. The fake medical reports claiming I had early dementia, the forged documents about my declining mental state, the nursing home brochures with sticky notes, memory care unit, private pay only. Elena wasn't just a caretaker, she was an actress, hired to document my confusion and inability to care for myself. I found her real contract. $2,000 a week to observe and report incidents of memory loss, unsafe behavior, and inability to maintain household. But Elena had gotten comfortable. Too comfortable. Her reports were supposed to be professional, but they'd become personal. Margaret seemed suspicious and paranoid. Today she accused me of wearing her jewelry, which is clearly a delusion. Recommend accelerating timeline. My delusion? I'd seen her wearing my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one David had given me on our 25th anniversary, the one that was supposedly lost 3 months ago. I found photographs in the notebook too, pictures of me taken without my knowledge, me reaching for items on high shelves, looking unsteady. Me sitting alone at the kitchen table, looking confused and disoriented. Me in my nightgown at 2 a.m., apparently wandering the house in a state of agitation. I remembered that night. I'd gotten up for a glass of water and found Elena sitting in my living room in the dark. When I asked what she was doing, she'd said she was keeping watch in case I needed help. I'd felt uncomfortable, but had gone back to bed. Now I realized she'd been staging that photo, making me look unstable and vulnerable. I climbed the stairs slowly, quietly. Elena was on the phone in my living room, speaking in rapid Spanish. I understood enough to catch the important parts. See, she found the basement. No, she doesn't suspect anything. The old woman is more confused than ever. She ended the call, and I heard her dial another number. Michael, your mother was acting strange today, very paranoid. I think we need to move faster. I crept back to my bedroom and locked the door. For the first time in months, I thought clearly. David used to tell me I had the sharpest mind he'd ever encountered. You see patterns others miss. Margaret, he'd say, you're a natural detective. It was time to prove him right. I pulled out my old address book and found the number I needed. Patricia Wells, my father's estate lawyer. If they thought I was too confused to handle my own affairs, they certainly wouldn't expect me to hire legal representation. The call lasted 15 minutes. Patricia was shocked to hear from me. Mrs. Thornfield, we've been trying to reach you for 6 months. Your mail keeps being returned, and someone claiming to be your son said you were in hospice care. I'm very much alive, I said quietly, and I need your help, but this conversation stays between us until I say otherwise. Patricia agreed to meet me the next morning at her office. Bring identification and any documents you have. We'll need to act quickly. After I hung up, I lay in bed listening to Elena moving around my house, probably reporting back to Michael about my bizarre behavior today. Let her report whatever she wanted. By tomorrow, I'd have the first piece of my counterattack in place. I thought about David, about the promises I'd made at his deathbed to protect our family. But family didn't steal from each other. Family didn't drug each other into submission. Family didn't plan murder together. Whatever Michael and Sarah had become, they weren't family anymore. But I needed proof of their fraud, concrete evidence that would hold up in court, and I knew exactly how to get it. Elena had made one mistake. She trusted that I was as helpless as I appeared. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I got dressed up. Really dressed up. I put on my navy blue suit, the one I'd worn to David's funeral, and my mother's diamond earrings that Sarah hadn't managed to borrow yet. Elena looked startled when I walked into the kitchen. "Mrs. Thornfield, where are you going dressed so nicely?" "Doctor's appointment." I lied smoothly. "My cardiologist. Michael arranged it. Didn't he tell you?" She fumbled with her phone, probably texting Michael for confirmation. Perfect. While she was distracted, I slipped my small digital recorder into my purse, the one David had used for work depositions. "I'll drive you," Elena offered, suspicious. "Already called a taxi," I said. "Should be here any minute." Elena's eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Thornfield, I don't think that's wise. You haven't been outside alone in weeks. What if you get confused? What if something happens?" "I'll be fine," I said firmly. "It's just a routine checkup. Let me call Michael." "No." My voice was sharper than I intended. "I can handle a simple doctor's appointment." Elena stared at me for a long moment. I could see her calculating, trying to decide if this was worth a confrontation. Finally, she nodded. "Of course. But please call if you need anything, and take your medication before you go." I looked at the pills she'd set out on the counter. 3 little pills that would make me compliant, confused, manageable. "I'll take them when I get back." "Mrs. Thornfield." I said I'll take them when I get back. The taxi honked outside. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, feeling Elena's eyes burning into my back. At Patricia Wells' law office, I learned the full scope of my father's estate. The $1.2 million was just the beginning. There were also mineral rights, oil royalties, and a trust fund that would provide monthly income for life. "Your father left specific instructions," Patricia explained. "He wanted to make amends for the years of estrangement. But Margaret, you need to understand, if someone has been intercepting your mail and screening your calls, they may have committed federal crimes." She handed me a thick folder. "These are copies of every letter and legal notice we sent. If someone was deliberately preventing you from claiming your inheritance, that's mail fraud. If they forged your signature on any documents, that's identity theft." I thought about Michael's notebook, about Elena's fake reports, about the nursing home brochures. What if they were planning to have me declared incompetent? Patricia's expression darkened. "Then we're talking about elder abuse, financial exploitation, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Margaret, how much access do they have to your current assets?" "Everything," I whispered. "Power of attorney, joint bank accounts, they're on all my credit cards. We need to act immediately. First, we'll place holds on all your accounts. Then we'll file for emergency protection orders." "But Margaret, are you prepared for what this means? You'll be going to war with your own son." I thought about David, about the promises I'd made at his deathbed to protect our family. But then I thought about the nursing home brochures, about Elena wearing my wedding ring, about Michael's cold calculations in that notebook. "My son declared war on me first," I said quietly. "I'm just finally fighting back." We spent 3 hours setting up my defense. New bank accounts they couldn't access. Legal documents revoking their power of attorney. Emergency restraining orders that would freeze their access to my assets. But most importantly, Patricia gave me something I'd lost months ago: hope. "Margaret," she said, as I prepared to leave, "I want you to be very careful. If your suspicions are correct, if they're planning what you think they're planning, then you're in real danger. Consider staying somewhere else, until we can get this sorted out. If I disappear now, they'll know I discovered their plan. They'll destroy the evidence and try again with another victim. Another victim. This is too well organized to be their first time. Elena is too professional. There have to be other families, other elderly people who've gone through this. Patricia nodded slowly. I'll have my investigator look into it. But promise me, you'll be careful. On the taxi ride home, I called my neighbor Dorothy Kim. She'd lived next door for 15 years, and I'd noticed her watching Elena with suspicious eyes. Dorothy, this is Margaret. Can you come over for coffee this afternoon? I need to ask you about something important. Of course, honey. I've been wanting to talk to you too, about that woman who's been living in your house. My heart pounded. What about her? Well, I didn't want to say anything, but I've seen some things that worried me. That woman has been using your credit cards all over town, and she's not alone. There's a man who comes by sometimes when you're sleeping. A man. Elena had accomplices. Dorothy, I need your help with something important. Can you be there at 3? I'll be there, Margaret. And honey, I'm glad you called. I've been worried about you. When I got home, Elena was waiting in the foyer with a smug smile and Michael's car in the driveway. Mrs. Thornfield, we need to talk. Michael is very concerned about your behavior today. He thinks it might be time to consider alternative living arrangements. Michael sat at my kitchen table, David's chair, with papers spread in front of him. Elena stood behind him like a guard. My own son looked at me like I was a stranger. Mom, sit down. Elena told me about your episode yesterday. The paranoid accusations, the confusion about her wearing your jewelry. I sat across from him, keeping my expression neutral. See, Elena whispered. She doesn't even remember accusing me. Michael leaned forward. Mom, we found these brochures in your room. Sunny Haven Memory Care. Did you put these there? The brochures from his notebook. They were planting evidence. I've never seen those before. The confusion is getting worse, Michael said softly, like he was talking to a child. Elena documented 3 incidents just this week. You forgot to turn off the stove. You couldn't remember the neighbors' names. You asked her the same question 5 times. All lies, but I played along. I don't remember. That's why we think it's time to consider professional care. Somewhere safe, where trained people can help you. Elena placed a gentle hand on Michael's shoulder. I hate to say this, but yesterday she seemed almost aggressive. I was frightened. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. When had his eyes become so cold? When had he learned to lie so smoothly? I need some time to think, I said finally. Of course, Mom. Take all the time you need. But I caught the look that passed between them. Time was the one thing I wouldn't have. Michael left after an hour, kissing my forehead like the dutiful son he'd never actually been. I love you, Mom. We just want what's best for you. After Michael left, Elena started her evening routine, the one where she pretended to care for me while actually gathering evidence of my incompetence. She made dinner, cleaned up, and settled the boys for homework. I watched her move through my house like she owned it, using my dishes, wearing my apron, sitting in my chair. She'd even rearranged the living room furniture to suit her preferences. At exactly 3 p.m., Dorothy knocked on the door. Mrs. Thornfield, she said loudly enough for Elena to hear, how lovely to see you. And you must be the caretaker everyone's been talking about. Elena's smile was plastic. Elena Martinez. I help Margaret with daily activities. How wonderful, Dorothy gushed. Margaret is so lucky to have family who cares. Though I have to say, I was surprised to see you wearing her jewelry to the grocery store last week. Elena's face went white. I don't know what you mean. The pearl necklace? I recognized it immediately. Margaret wore it to every neighborhood barbecue for 10 years. Of course, maybe she gave it to you as a gift. I watched Elena struggle. If she claimed I'd given it to her, she'd contradict the reports about my declining mental state. If she denied wearing it, Dorothy would know she was lying. Margaret sometimes gets confused about her belongings, Elena said carefully. Oh, I'm sure she does, Dorothy said sweetly. Just like she got confused about giving you permission to use her credit cards at that expensive restaurant downtown. My daughter saw you there with a man last Friday night, spending quite generously, from what she observed. Elena's composure cracked completely. I think you should leave. Of course, dear. Margaret, I'll see you tomorrow for our usual walk, won't I? I nodded, not trusting my voice. After Dorothy left, Elena was on the phone immediately. I heard her speaking rapidly in Spanish, then switching to English. She's suspicious. No, the neighbor saw too much. We need to move faster. I pretended to nap on the living room couch while Elena made call after call. Each conversation made it clearer. This wasn't just about stealing my house. There was a whole network involved. People who specialized in targeting elderly women, stealing their assets, and making them disappear into nursing homes. But they'd chosen the wrong target this time. That evening, I lay in bed listening to Elena's conversations through the thin walls. She thought I was heavily sedated from the pills she'd given me, pills I'd only pretended to swallow. The timeline needs to accelerate, she whispered into her phone. The neighbor is asking too many questions. Yes, I can handle it. No, she won't be a problem much longer. At midnight, I heard my front door open and close. Through my window, I watched Elena walk to a car parked down the street. A car with two men inside. They talked for 20 minutes, and when she came back, she was carrying something that looked like medical equipment. The next morning, I pretended to be more confused than ever. I shuffled around in my robe, asked Elena the same questions repeatedly, and forgot where I'd put my reading glasses 3 times in an hour. Elena documented everything with her phone, taking videos of my disorientation and photographing my unsafe behavior when I reached for dishes on high shelves. But what she didn't know was that I was documenting her too. The tiny recording device Dorothy had brought me yesterday, borrowed from her son, who worked in private security, was capturing every conversation, every phone call, every whispered consultation about my deteriorating condition. Around noon, while Elena was distracted with the boys' lunch, I retrieved the medical equipment she'd hidden in the coat closet. Syringes, small vials of clear liquid, and medical charts with my name on them. The vials were labeled haloperidol, a powerful sedative used to treat psychiatric conditions. My hands shook as I photographed everything with Dorothy's digital camera. They weren't just planning to declare me incompetent. They were planning to drug me into submission. I quickly returned everything exactly as I'd found it, and went back to playing the confused grandmother. That afternoon, Patricia Wells called with an update. Margaret, we've frozen all your joint accounts and filed the restraining orders, but there's something else. I hired a private investigator to look into Elena Martinez. She's not a licensed caregiver. In fact, she has a criminal record for elder abuse in Nevada. How is that possible? Michael said he'd thoroughly vetted her. Margaret, I don't think your son found Elena through legitimate channels. The investigator traced her employment to a company that specializes in, shall we say, problematic elder care situations. They provide services to families who want to expedite inheritance claims. The room spun around me. Michael hadn't just hired a caretaker, he'd hired a professional criminal. There's more, Patricia continued. We found similar cases in 3 other states. Elderly women with valuable estates who were declared incompetent by family members, placed in care facilities, and died within months of mysterious causes. Elena Martinez was the caregiver in 2 of those cases. I gripped the phone so tightly, my knuckles went white. They're planning to kill me. The evidence suggests that's a possibility. Margaret, we need to get you out of that house immediately. I can arrange. No, I said firmly. If I disappear now, they'll know I discovered their plan. They'll destroy the evidence and try again with another victim. I need to finish this. Margaret, you're talking about putting yourself in extreme danger. I've been in danger for months. The difference is now I know it. After I hung up, I sat in David's old chair, the one Elena had claimed as her own, and planned my next move. Tonight I'd get the proof I needed. Elena would make her usual midnight call to her handlers, and this time I'd be ready. But first, I had one more call to make. Dorothy? It's Margaret. Tomorrow evening, I need you to call the police and report a wellness check on me. Tell them you're concerned because you haven't seen me all day and my grandsons are crying in the backyard. Margaret, What are you planning? Justice, I said simply. After 40 years of putting everyone else first, I'm finally putting myself first. That evening, Elena gave me my usual medications, or what I thought were my medications, but I'd been palming the pills for 3 days, pretending to swallow them while actually keeping them in my cheek, until I could spit them out later. Tonight, she gave me 2 extra pills. Your son called, she said gently. He's concerned about your agitation today. These will help you sleep peacefully. I pretended to take them, then stumbled to my bedroom like a woman heavily sedated. But I was wide awake waiting for Elena to make her move. At 11:47 p.m., I heard Elena's key turn in my bedroom door, the lock they'd installed for my safety. She crept into my room carrying a syringe, believing I was unconscious from the drugs she'd given me. I lay perfectly still, controlling my breathing, as Elena approached my bed with the syringe. In the dim light from the hallway, I could see her face, cold, calculating, professional. She was about to inject something into my IV port when I spoke quietly. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Elena jumped, dropping the syringe. It clattered on the hardwood floor, the sound impossibly loud in the midnight silence. Mrs. Thornfield, you startled me. I was just checking your medication line. I sat up slowly, turning on the bedside lamp. With a syringe full of what, Elena? Haloperidol? Or something stronger this time? Her mask finally slipped completely. The gentle caregiver disappeared, replaced by someone hard and dangerous. You're not as confused as you pretend to be. No, I said calmly. I'm not. Just like you're not actually a licensed caregiver. Just like those medical reports about my dementia are forgeries. Just like my inheritance letters didn't get lost in the mail, you and Michael intercepted them. Elena's hand moved toward her phone. You're having another paranoid episode, Mrs. Thornfield. I need to call Michael. Call him, I said. Tell him the job is finished. Tell him his mother won't be a problem anymore. Tell him whatever lie you've been telling the families of your other victims. Her face went completely white. What other victims? Rose Patterson in Nevada. Dorothy Chen in Arizona. Margaret, interesting coincidence, with the name Margaret Sullivan in Oregon. All elderly widows with valuable estates, all declared incompetent by loving family members, all dead within 6 months of your care. Elena lunged for the syringe on the floor, but I was faster than she expected. I kicked it under the bed and grabbed the recorder from my nightstand. Smile, Elena. You've been starring in your own documentary all week. I pressed play, and her voice filled the room. Yes, she's suspicious. The old woman is more confused than ever. We need to move faster. She won't survive another dose. Elena stared at the recorder like it was a poisonous snake. You can't prove anything. That could be anyone's voice. Maybe. But combined with the photos I took of your medical supplies, the financial record showing Michael's debts, the background check showing your criminal history, and the witness statements from 3 neighbors who saw you using my credit cards, I smiled. I think it's enough. Elena's entire demeanor changed. The fake gentleness vanished, replaced by raw fury. You stupid old woman. Do you have any idea what you've done? There are people involved in this that you can't even imagine. People who don't like loose ends. Like you? Like me. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small pistol. Michael was right. You were always too smart for your own good. I looked at the gun, then back at her face. Elena, before you do something that can't be undone, let me ask you one question. How much is Michael paying you for this job? 10,000, plus a percentage of the estate once it's settled. And how much do you think my estate is worth? Michael said, about 200,000. The house, some savings. I laughed, actually laughed. Elena, my father's estate alone is worth $1.2 million. My husband's life insurance policy was another 400,000. The house is worth 380,000 in today's market. You're risking murder charges for $10,000 when the real prize is worth almost 2 million. The gun wavered in her hand. You're lying. Ask yourself why Michael was so eager to rush this job. Why he wanted me declared incompetent so quickly. Why he didn't want to wait for a natural death. I could see the calculation in her eyes, the greed overriding the fear. Elena was smart enough to realize she'd been cheated, but not smart enough to realize I was buying time. Even if that's true, she said finally, it's too late now. I can't let you live, knowing what you know. No, I agreed. You probably can't. That's when the flashing red and blue lights filled my bedroom window. Elena spun toward the window, gun still in her hand, just as my front door exploded inward. But the cavalry arriving wasn't just the police Dorothy had called. It was someone I never expected to see again. The first person through my bedroom door wasn't a police officer. It was my nephew James, David's brother's son, who I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Behind him came 2 detectives, 3 uniformed officers, and Dorothy Kim with a look of grim satisfaction. Elena still held the gun, but she was surrounded and outnumbered. Her eyes darted between the officers and me, calculating her last desperate options. Elena Martinez, Detective Rodriguez announced. You're under arrest for attempted murder, elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. Drop the weapon. Elena's hand shook. For a moment, I thought she might try to shoot her way out. Then she looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, Margaret. Michael will find another way. No, I said quietly. He won't. As they handcuffed Elena, James approached my bed. Aunt Margaret. I'm so sorry. If I'd known what Michael was doing. How did you know to come tonight? Your lawyer called me yesterday. Patricia Wells. She said you were in danger and needed family support. I caught the first flight from Denver. Detective Rodriguez pulled out his notepad. Mrs. Thornfield, we need your statement about everything that's happened here. But first, are you injured? Do you need medical attention? I looked around my bedroom, the syringe on the floor, the recording device on my nightstand, the photographs Dorothy had helped me take, evidence of months of systematic abuse and attempted murder. I'm fine, I said, but there's something else you need to know. Elena wasn't working alone. I told them about Michael's notebook, about the network of people who specialized in targeting elderly victims, about the other women who had died under suspicious circumstances. We'll need access to all the evidence you've gathered, Detective Martinez said. The recording device, the photographs, any documents you've collected. It's all here, Dorothy said, producing a manila envelope. Margaret and I have been very thorough. As the police processed the scene, James sat beside my bed. Aunt Margaret, why didn't you call me sooner? Why didn't you reach out when this started? I thought about the answer, because I kept hoping Michael would come to his senses. I kept believing that somewhere inside him was still the little boy I raised, the son who used to bring me flowers and tell me I was the best mother in the world. And now? Now I know that little boy died the same day his father did. What's left is a stranger who sees me as nothing more than an obstacle to his inheritance. Detective Rodriguez returned with an update. Mrs. Thornfield, we've arrested your son at his apartment. He was burning documents when we arrived, but we recovered enough evidence to charge him with conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. The words hit me like physical blows. My son, my only child. The baby I'd nursed through pneumonia, the teenager I'd bailed out of jail, the young man I'd helped through college, and his first marriage, and his business failures. What will happen to my grandsons? Child Protective Services is working with Sarah's parents. The boys will be placed with them temporarily while this gets sorted out. At least there was that. The children were innocent in all this. They didn't deserve to pay for their parents' crimes. As dawn broke through my bedroom windows, the house finally emptied of police and evidence technicians. James made coffee while Dorothy helped me change out of my nightgown and into clean clothes. What happens now? Dorothy asked. I looked around my house, the house David and I had filled with love and laughter, the house that had become a prison, the house that would now be a crime scene for months. Now I decide who I want to be for the rest of my life. I said, for the past 5 years, I've been Michael's mother, the grieving widow, the helpful grandmother. But I was Margaret Elena Thornfield, long before I was any of those things. James poured coffee into David's favorite mug, the one Elena had been using all week. What does Margaret Elena Thornfield want? I smiled for the first time in months. She wants to disappear for a while, and when she comes back, she wants to make sure no other family ever gets away with what mine tried to do to me. 6 months later, I sat in a Denver courtroom, watching my son Michael plead guilty to elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted financial exploitation. He wore an orange jumpsuit and looked 20 years older than when I'd last seen him. Elena had already been sentenced to 15 years in prison. Her network of criminal caregivers was under federal investigation, with victims coming forward from 7 different states. The FBI had called me a hero for exposing what they called one of the most sophisticated elder abuse operations they'd ever encountered. Michael's lawyer tried to negotiate a lighter sentence, claiming his client was under financial pressure, that he'd never intended physical harm, that he deeply regretted his actions. When Judge Patricia Hendricks asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement, I stood slowly and walked to the podium. Michael couldn't meet my eyes. "Your Honor, the defendant is my son. I gave birth to him, raised him, loved him unconditionally for 42 years. When his father died, I used our entire life savings to try to save him. When Michael needed a place to live, I opened my home. When he needed money, I gave him everything I had." My voice stayed steady. Professional, but the man sitting at that table isn't my son anymore. My son would never hire someone to drug his mother. My son would never forge medical documents to have me declared incompetent. My son would never participate in a plan that could have ended with my death. I turned to look at Michael directly. He was crying now, but I felt nothing. "I don't forgive you, Michael. Not because I'm cruel, but because forgiveness would require me to minimize what you did, and I won't do that. You didn't just try to steal my money. You tried to steal my dignity, my independence, my right to exist as a human being with value. However, I don't want revenge either. What I want is justice. I want you to serve enough time to understand the magnitude of what you attempted. I want you to get whatever help you need to become someone worthy of redemption. And I want other families to see that elder abuse has serious consequences." Judge Hendricks sentenced Michael to 8 years in federal prison, with eligibility for parole in 5 years. As they led him away, he finally looked at me. "Mom," he whispered. "I'm sorry." I nodded, but said nothing. Sorry was a start, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Outside the courthouse, James walked with me to our rental car. I'd sold the house in Colorado and moved to Denver to be closer to him and his family. My grandsons visited every other weekend now, supervised visits until Sarah completed her court-mandated counseling for financial crimes. "How do you feel?" James asked. "Free," I said simply. "For the first time in 5 years, I feel completely free." My inheritance from my father's estate had finally been processed, combined with the life insurance money I'd recovered, and the proceeds from selling the house. I had enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life. But more importantly, I had a purpose. Patricia Wells and I had started a foundation to help elderly victims of financial abuse. We'd hired the private investigator who had exposed Elena's criminal network, and we were working with law enforcement agencies across the country to identify and prosecute similar operations. Every week I received letters from families who'd found themselves in situations similar to mine. Adult children who'd grown entitled and greedy, caregivers who were stealing from their clients, relatives who were manipulating elderly family members for financial gain. I couldn't save everyone, but I could save some, and that was enough. Dorothy Kim had moved to Denver too, partly to help with the foundation, partly because we'd become genuine friends during those terrible months when she was the only person who believed me. "Margaret," she said, one evening as we reviewed case files in my new office, "do you ever regret exposing Michael? He was your only child." I thought about the question. "Dorothy, Michael made his choice when he hired Elena. I just made sure there were consequences for that choice. If I'd stayed silent, how many other mothers would have suffered what I suffered? How many other families would have gotten away with elder abuse? And your grandsons, do you think they'll understand when they're older?" I hope so. I hope they'll understand that sometimes loving someone means holding them accountable for their actions, even when it's painful. That night, I received a letter that changed everything. It was from Michael, written from his prison cell, but it wasn't asking for forgiveness or making excuses. It was something I never expected. Michael's letter arrived on a Tuesday, exactly 1 year after Elena had been arrested in my bedroom. The handwriting was the same as when he was a child, careful and deliberate. Mom, I know you don't want to hear from me, and I understand why. I know you don't owe me forgiveness, and I'm not writing to ask for it. I'm writing because I need you to know something important. I've been in therapy here for 6 months, court mandated at first, but I've continued voluntarily because I'm finally starting to understand what I became and why. The therapist says I have something called financial traumas from Dad's illness and death, watching you spend everything we had trying to save him, then struggling to pay bills afterward, created a panic in me that I never addressed. I became obsessed with security, with having enough money to never feel that vulnerable again. But that doesn't excuse what I did to you. Nothing excuses what I did to you. Mom, I need you to know that Elena approached me first. She knew about Dad's death, about our financial struggles, about your isolation. She presented herself as a legitimate caregiver, but her real pitch was about protecting family assets and ensuring smooth transitions for elderly family members. I was drowning in debt. Sarah's medical bills from the twins' premature birth, my failed business, credit cards I'd maxed out trying to keep us afloat. When Elena offered a way to access your inheritance early, I told myself I was being practical. I told myself you were getting older anyway, that you'd be happier in professional care, that this was just accelerating an inevitable process. I never admitted to myself that I was stealing from you. I never admitted that I was planning to have you declared incompetent against your will. I definitely never admitted that Elena's care might have shortened your life. I lived in denial for months, right up until the moment I saw you in that courtroom. When you said the man at the defendant's table wasn't your son anymore, I realized you were right. I had become someone else entirely, someone I didn't recognize, someone I hated. Mom, I can't undo what I did. I can't take back the fear I caused you, the betrayal, the months of manipulation and abuse. I can't restore the trust I destroyed, or repair the relationship I shattered. But I can make sure this never happens to anyone else. I've been working with the FBI, providing information about Elena's network and other operations like hers. I've identified 17 families who were targeted for similar schemes. My testimony has helped convict 6 people so far, with more trials coming. I've also been writing a book about financial elder abuse, about the warning signs families should watch for, about how desperation can turn children into predators against their own parents. The publisher says it could help prevent other families from going through what we went through. I'm donating any profits to your foundation. Patricia Wells has the legal documents. I know this doesn't make up for anything. I know you may never want to see me again. And I've accepted that, but I needed you to know that your courage in exposing me didn't just save your own life, it's saving other lives too. The little boy who brought you flowers is still in here somewhere. Mom, buried under years of fear and greed and selfishness. But still here, I'm trying to find him again. I'm trying to become someone worthy of the mother who raised me. I don't expect a response to this letter. I just needed you to know. Your son, if you'll still claim me, Michael. I read the letter 3 times, sitting in my kitchen with tears streaming down my face. Not tears of forgiveness. I wasn't ready for that yet, but tears of something else. Hope, maybe, or relief that the son I'd loved for 42 years might still exist somewhere inside the man who'd betrayed me. The next morning, I did something that surprised even me. I called the prison and arranged a visit. The prison visiting room was nothing like I'd expected. Fluorescent lights, plastic chairs, the smell of industrial disinfectant. Michael sat across from me in his orange jumpsuit, looking nervous and older than his 43 years. We stared at each other for a long moment before either of us spoke. "You came," he said finally. I almost didn't. "What changed your mind?" I thought about the question. "Your letter. The part about helping other families. I needed to see if you meant it, or if it was just another manipulation." Michael nodded slowly. "I understand why you'd think that. I've lied to you so many times." "Yes, you have." We talked for an hour, about his therapy, about the book he was writing, about the FBI cases he was helping with. He showed me pictures the boys had drawn for him. Crayon sketches of stick figures labeled Daddy and Grandma Margaret. "They ask about you all the time," he said. "Sarah's parents try to explain why they can't see you, but they don't really understand. How is Sarah? Completing her community service. She's been going to therapy too. The guilt has been eating her alive. I felt nothing when he said that. No satisfaction, no sympathy, just emptiness, where my feelings for my daughter-in-law used to be. Michael, I need you to understand something, I said as our visit neared its end. I may never forgive you completely. I may never trust you again, even if you serve your full sentence, even if you help convict 100 other criminals, even if you become a completely different person. I may never be able to look at you and forget what you tried to do to me. His eyes filled with tears. I know. But I can respect the choice you're making now. I can support your efforts to help other families. And I can hope that someday, maybe, we can find a way to be in each other's lives again. That's more than I deserve. Yes, I agreed. It is. On the drive home, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I was a victim, confused, isolated, helpless. Elena and Michael had seen me as an easy target, a frail old woman who would disappear quietly when they decided she was no longer useful. They couldn't have been more wrong. I was Margaret Elena Thornfield. I had survived the Great Recession, my husband's death, years of financial struggle, and my son's betrayal. I had exposed a criminal network, saved other families from similar fates, and built a new life on my own terms. At 69 years old, I was stronger, smarter, and more independent than I'd ever been. That evening, I sat in my Denver apartment with James and Dorothy, working on foundation cases. We'd helped recover over $800,000 in stolen assets for elderly victims in the past year. We'd provided legal support to 37 families dealing with financial elder abuse. We'd trained police departments in 6 states to recognize the warning signs of systematic exploitation. Margaret, Dorothy said, as we reviewed our quarterly report, do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't fought back? If you just accepted their plan? I smiled, looking at the photographs on my desk, pictures of the families we'd helped, letters from grateful victims, newspaper articles about our work. I'd be dead, I said simply. Elena would have succeeded in her plan. Michael would have inherited my estate, and somewhere right now, another elderly woman would be facing the same nightmare I faced. Instead, I'm here. I'm free. I'm helping other people find their freedom. And my son is in prison learning to be human again. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most become the people who hurt us the deepest. But that doesn't mean we have to accept that hurt. It doesn't mean we have to disappear quietly when they decide we're inconvenient. I spent 68 years putting everyone else first. My husband, my son, my grandchildren. I made myself smaller and smaller until I almost vanished completely. But when Elena walked into my kitchen wearing my wedding ring, when Michael handed me those nursing home brochures, when they tried to steal not just my money but my very existence, that's when I remembered who I really was. I was Margaret Elena Thornfield. I was a fighter, and I wasn't going anywhere. If my story has touched you, if you've seen your own family struggles reflected in mine, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button to help other people find this story. And in the comments, tell me, what country are you watching from? I want to know how far this message of survival and strength has traveled. Remember, you are never too old, too tired, or too afraid to stand up for yourself. Sometimes fighting back is the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for others who might face the same battle. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for believing that even in our darkest moments, we can find the strength to reclaim our light.